Okay, so we continue now in the Otzros Chaim. And until now, we had been discussing the existence of the Ein Sof, the infinite, and the constriction of the infinite to create a new space in which the existence of the Ein Sof is not readily apparent or experienced. And now we're going to discuss what occurs within this new creation. So when the Ein Sof constricted itself and created the void, now there's a problem because within the void, the infinite is hidden. And therefore, how can the creations that are within the void in which the light is hidden, how can they exist? After all, their existence is dependent on receiving God's light. On the other hand, if God's light would be shining with its full force into the void, then as we've discussed several times in the past, the force of that light would nullify the entirety of any existence within the void. So we're stuck here in a conundrum. On the one hand, in the absence of God's light, of any spiritual influence, there can't be any existence. On the other hand, the entire creation of the void was because in the face of God's manifest presence, there's no room for any existence. So how do you balance this conundrum? So therefore, in order that the creations within the void can continue to exist, we've discussed in the past that the void is, again, metaphorically in the shape of a sphere. So on one side of the void, I like to call it a linelight. One line of light penetrated in, light of the infinite, in order to shine upon the creations. Now, again, when we speak about this line of light, it's a metaphor for the fact that this was not a light that was shining from all directions, because as we've said again, a light coming from all directions would have overwhelmed any existence within what was meant to be a void. But rather, we describe it as a line in order to indicate that it is a very constricted and limited amount of that light penetrated in, not with its full force, but a very little and to a large extent hidden light that was appropriate for those that are within that void. Now, in a footnote, well, two footnotes over here, he makes a couple of very important points. Number one, again, he repeats what we've mentioned beforehand, that really this entire void is perceptual and not actual. But for those of us within this perceptual existence, it's necessary that everything that surrounds us and everything with which we interact fits within the rules of this state of existence, or so to speak, in this dimension in which we exist. And therefore, the light that's pouring in from the Ein Sof, from the infinite, has to be light that comes in such a manner that is commensurate with the existence in which we are. Meaning, to take it to another level, we need to have the ability to find God within this existence. Because as much as God has hidden himself, he still wants us to find him. Because the whole purpose of the existence is to figure out how to navigate that conundrum. And therefore, there's got to be enough light for us to be able to know that God is giving us existence, to recognize Him, and to connect to Him. It's point number one that the B'yam Darkecha brings out in a footnote. Point number two, we said that the light comes from one side into the halal, into the void. And again, as we've said many times, we're not really talking about a real void. This is all metaphors, and therefore there's not really a particular side to the metaphorical void. But again, the void that we've discussed, that spherical void that we've mentioned, is the metaphor for this new existence that God created, the one within which those who are present don't easily discern and experience God, and certainly do not experience God in His full force. And one of the reasons why it's described as a sphere, because the sphere encompasses everything that's within it, is to let us know that this is a sort of a self-contained dimension that has its own rules that have to be met, even by the linelight that's coming in. And therefore, when we speak about the light coming in from a particular side or a particular end of it, we mean to say is as follows, that within this existence that God created, not everything is uniform. And there are different levels, right? Like what we've kind of touched on a little bit, we'll speak more about this later on. There are different worlds. And within the different worlds, there are different spheros or spherot, depending on your pronunciation. And each one of these represents a different type of revelation, or we could say a different type of opportunity for us to experience God. And therefore, when we speak over here of the light coming in from one side, that's another way of saying that the light came in the guise of the sphera of Keser. And as we go on, we will have opportunity to discuss what Keser means. But Keser or Keter, which literally means crown, that always represents the beginning of a particular set of spheros. So despite the fact that there was a void within which we were not meant to be able to easily discern and experience God, but He brought in a line light shining in there from the aspect of Keser to give us the ability on some level to experience God. We'll continue to discuss that in our next Shaar. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good evening.